Hello and welcome to episode 120 of the Alfa Romeo Driver Podcast, brought to you by the Alfa Romeo Owners Club. I'm Guy Swarbrick, and this month I'm at Goodwood during a fairly noisy test session to meet legendary Alfa racer Chris Snowdon and his business partner Richard Melvin to talk about their long association with the Alfetta GTV and the ex-Jon Dooley Napolina GTV6 that they'll be racing at the Goodwood Members Meeting later this month. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
So it's a lovely blustery day here at Goodwood in testing for the members meeting, which as we record this is just over 2 weeks away?
2 weeks away, yeah, not very far.
How did it go this morning?
It went all right, yeah. We've been trying to chase a few little handling difficulties that we've been having, and we managed to make a little bit of progress by lunchtime, and then we thought we'd try something radical, and it was radical, which didn't work. So we've now managed to put it back to where we were, and it now seems to be working, which is much better than we were in this time last year.
Yeah, so I came down last year for your test day and then back for the race meeting. You were having engine problems last year,
We
right?
had a number of little engine problems, yeah. There was a few... I don't know how to say it really, but a few little things that went wrong with the engine that possibly shouldn't have gone wrong, and ought to just leave it at that, really.
but they've all been unwronged.
So they've all been unwronged, and Richard built this latest engine in the workshop with the help of D'Amico engine builders near Snetterton. I can't remember the village there. East Harling, yes. So we get on really well with Darren there, and get on with the whole family there. They've been really helpful with various bits and pieces, which is great. And we seem to be in a better place than we were last year engine-wise. So we just hope the members meeting, which is coming up, is dry, no snow, no ice.
all of which are possible.
All of which have been possible and have happened. So yeah, we're looking forward to that. We've got Tiff Needell sharing the car with us. We seem to get on quite well. He wanted to come testing, but it's been unfortunate. There's been a mismatch in time, so he'll get in the car for the first time on Saturday morning. This year it's a celebrity race on the Saturday. They qualify, race on Saturday. We, the car owners, qualify on Sunday, race on Sunday.
Okay, so there's no driver swaps in there?
No driver swaps. The Win Percy's no driver swaps. The Jerry Marshall race is, with the big bangers, is a 45-minute race. So that's driver swap, which is, I don't know whether it's Saturday or Sunday. So a different format this year. Kind of slightly a shame that VIP celebrities, whatever you like to call them, get to go in the car before we get to go, and causes its own problems really, but we'll just have to overcome.
Well, I guess it removes a development day apart from anything else.
Well, it also, if something goes wrong, you don't get to drive your own car.
Yeah. Which is a bit of a bummer, but...
Now, it makes me feel really old to say this, but it is a 40-odd-year-old car.
It is.
So how is it hanging together?
Touch wood. A lot of it is not 40 years old now.
We'll get to that.
The 40-year-old bits... Some of the 40-year-old bits, there are some 40-year-old bits on the car, which are hanging together. A lot of when Richard bought the car from Jon Dooley, I'm not sure it was actually hanging together.
It wasn't in a happy state.
It was not in a happy state. No, that's very true. And so we spent a long time putting it back, and Richard wanted to not do it as a complete nut and bolt restoration. He wanted to keep some of the floor pans and some of the patina that was attached to the car, which Jon Dooley did with hammers and various different bits and pieces back in the day.
John and Bob Dove and Ron.
They put their own sort of feel to it. It would have been nice to have started again, because we could have done, but then you don't have the real car, and we've got the real car now, so which is really quite nice actually.
So it's got lovely things like the transmission tunnels with loads of plating and stuff on it from when the flywheel flew off in the British Grand Prix race and it came through the floor, so that's all still there, and all the sill bumps and dinks are still there from when they bashed them in to get the side exhaust sound.
We were talking just before we came to start recording the podcast, so this was originally the Alfa UK sales director's company car?
I believe so, yeah. Yeah, and he crashed it. That's how the dealer team ended up with it. It had a front end impact, and they were given that sort of lent officially by Alfa UK. That's the car that they developed.
They didn't take it back?
Apparently not. No, they can't have it now. So yeah, so that's how the car came about, and then it was a Group 1 car in 1982. which was the last year of Group 1 in the UK, and then became a Group A car in line with all the FIA stuff in Europe for 83, 84 and 85, and then it was retired.
So the last time we met, you told me the story of how you got hold of that car. So just run us through the highlights, because it was quite a long journey to...
Well, yeah, but I bought the 2-litre Alfetta that Chris races for me, which is a Group 2 car, which used to belong to Peter Hilliard and Leo Bertorelli, another dealer team car. And when I first bought it, I didn't have access to parts. There was nothing available. You couldn't get these specialist race parts for the Alfettas and 75s, or there was very, very little available. I was always told that Jon had stuff in his barns. And Bob Dove told me I needed to speak to Peter Jon, so continually sort of bugged Jon about letting me get some parts. And he always said, yeah, I'll sort it out for you. I'm going to go through all my barns, I'll go through all my stuff, and I'll let you know what I've got. And that went on for about 6 years.
I think I'm going to was one of Jon's catchphrases.
It was, yeah, very much so. Until he suddenly did. We were at a race meeting at Mallory Park, and he just came up to me and said, I've sent you an email. Lo and behold, he'd sent me an email listing all of his barn parts, all the cars, all the lists, all the things that he had, which was quite a long list. And I think I brought it down to you, didn't I? I was looking at it going, really? And then Jon let me go and have a look, and we went through, there's like 14 chicken huts, for want of a better word, at the back of his place, with hay bales in the ends. And we were putting hay bales out, pushing torches through, gazing in. Each Nissan hut had 4 cars in it, all piled with parts, and it was ridiculous, you know. And then I noticed the GTV6, and I said, is that the Napolina car? And he said, well, yes, it is. I asked him if it was for sale, and he said, yes. And then he wanted a ridiculous amount of money for it, absolutely ludicrous. And until I think Bob intervened and sort of pointed out that the car didn't really belong to him in the first place. We ended up doing a deal for it, which is quite nice. In the meantime, we'd already restored the 2-litre car, and we were getting on quite well with it, weren't we, at the time? And Chris had a lot of success with it. And it was, just that car had been sat on the back burner now. The GTV6 had always been, we'll do it, we'll get round to it. And there was never anything particularly out there that gave you the goal to get it finished until Goodwood announced this smaller car race for the Jerry Marshall. Previously, Chris had run a GTV6 in the Jerry Marshall Trophy. Quite successful, I think.
Yeah.
And it went very well, but it was always going back down the grid because everything else was going so much faster. And it seemed a bit of not a waste, but it didn't seem the right thing to do. And so I never really got around to finishing the car until this small car Group 1 race was announced. And then we kind of said, well, let's do it. Let's get the car ready, let's go and do it. And that's, we had about 3 months, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah. And then it was ready.
Sort of.
So given what you said about it still having some 40-year-old parts, Chris, and what sounds like the state it was in the chicken coop when you found it, 3 months sounds remarkable. So what happened in that 3 months?
Well, it's sort of 3 months stroke 5 years in a way. So it's not wrong, am I?
No,
so at the beginning of it, I put the car back together for Richard. I welded on a new roof, floor bits and pieces. I can't remember whether I put wings on it, didn't I?
No, the original wings. We did the rear panel.
Rear panel, roof, sills, all sorts of stuff that we could do over a period, and got it to the paint shop and had it all painted. And once it was painted, it then ended up staying on a spit for probably 18 months, maybe even 2 years.
Yeah.
And having got it to that stage, and then we ended up having to move workshop because they were going to build houses in the old workshop. So we then moved to where we are now. And as Richard said, the Goodwood announced this under 3-litre class for the Win Percy Trophy race. So that was the start of 3 months of putting it together. Richard, in the meantime, over the period of when it had been painted,
5 years, like you say,
had managed to find and make lots of bits, because that's kind of what he does. And because we've proven the bits work on the 2-litre car, we were able to cross over with quite a lot of the bits that we had for that onto this one, which clearly needed different engine, but, we've done engines before, and I've been racing GTV6s since 1994. So, apparently I know a little bit about them.
So they say.
You talked about the problem getting spares when you were working on the 2-litre car.
Yeah.
You've kind of solved that problem between you, haven't you?
Yeah, pretty much.
Mechanically, we've solved a lot of the problems getting bits. The biggest problem with the parts is panels, because nobody's making any panels. Unfortunately, we're not in a position to get panels made. So you are looking at old cars to keep slightly newer cars going, which is always a problem because you've got to find better bits that are on the car. And now they're getting harder to find. And now you're paying a lot of money for cars that are really not worth very much money at all.
And people have talked about these cars becoming the new 105s for 20 years.
20 years, yeah.
But there aren't the volumes out there to justify the kind of businesses there are supplying parts for 105s.
I don't think there are, no, not even around the world. I mean, Richard does really well selling bits and pieces all around the world, but most of those bits are in conjunction with EB spares, and Richard's stuff is more race stuff rather than road stuff.
Yeah, it's a bit expensive, high end race gear, and
it just causes people don't really want to spend that sort of money on their road cars, which is a shame because they warrant it. Because they're actually a good looking car. I would say a better looking car than the 105, but I'm slightly biased. I've been involved for a number of years. So, I think being able to supply the mechanical parts is a help. I'm surprised nobody in Europe has ever bitten the bullet and made some front wings and stuff, but they just haven't. You can get repair panels and bits and pieces which sort of fit, after you've taken them.
Yeah. Although, again, conversation we were having in the paddock before we came up here, that's always been true of factory parts as well. It's not necessarily just parts and bits.
I think what we have done well over the last few years is developed the 116 suspension, 116 to 75 suspension packages to the point where I don't think they'd ever been before.
Yeah, no, they are. Yes, yeah, we've got a number of customers that have put them onto their sprint and hill climb cars now, and they're enjoying the benefits of what we've managed to achieve with our suspension bits and pieces, which is quite nice. So all the bits that Richard makes have been kind of slightly race proven, not slightly, have been race proven, and long and short of it, if they're going to break out there, then they're probably not going to break on the road.
Although more potholes on the road than there are on the average road track.
There are more potholes on the road. Yes, that's very true. But, fortunately, we've had some success with the race cars, and that has proven that the bits that have been made kind of work, which kind of race on Saturday, Sunday, and sell on Monday. I can't remember who said that. I think Ford said that, didn't they?
I think it was Henry Ford Jr.
Said that, yeah. But it kind of works. It does, and unfortunately, or fortunately, the more social media you do, the more bits that Richard seems to sell, which is great.
We'll come back and talk about the business in a minute, because I think people will be really interested in that. The other thing I want to talk about before I forget is last year there were 2 Napolina cars in there.
Yes, indeed.
In the paddock, one of which was, at the time, Chris Wheeler-known Alfa Sid, which was part next to you, but not a car you looked after at the time.
We weren't looking after it at the time. No, Chris was run through Westbourne Racing. And since then, a customer of ours, Peter Forfar, has purchased the car and got a Goodwood entry, and we're looking after that this year, as well as the GTV6.
Obviously, one of the things that the listeners to the podcast won't be able to tell is that Richard's wearing a Napolina Alfa Romeo dealer team T-shirt, which was kind of still accurate last year, but more so now you've got both the cars.
Yeah, we've got both cars. Obviously, Peter is driving his car on Sunday in the same grid as Chris in the GTV6, and then on the Saturday, we've got Tiffany Dale and he's got Chris Harris. So we've got bookend Top Gear presenters.
I'll be interested to see if Chris uses as much of the mud on the exit from the chicane as Tiff does. Most of my favourite photos from last year are the GTV6 with 2 wheels just about on the track and the rest of it in the dirt.
Yeah, I think he didn't have a lot of choice at the time, so it was the quickest way round.
It looked quick until it.
We might not be quite as noisy this year, but we have some very noisy twin open pipes on it. I'm not sure what we're going to do this year. Maybe something slightly less obnoxious.
We'll see.
That would be a shame.
You could hear us coming a mile off, apparently.
Yeah, you definitely could. Well, it was handy for me because the Alfa Sud wasn't out, the GTV6 was the only car I was shooting, so I could get on with editing stuff, and I knew when it was coming. So I didn't miss it.
Well, the only reason we did that was because that's how Jon ran it originally on the dealer team setup, was they had two exhausts coming out either side, so it sort of droned like a Ferrari Dino. But I'm not sure that's necessarily the best way for it.
I don't think so, but that's
obviously what happened.
So I'll ask each of you the same question. Starting with Chris, how did you get involved? You said you've been involved with racing GTV6s since 94.
Yeah.
How did you get involved with Alfa, if it's a different answer, and GTV6 racing?
The same answer. GTV6 and Alfa came together. At the time in 92, 94, I'd been racing an awful lot in various different groups of cars, from Davrins to Sports 2000s to Minis to Thunder Saloons in the Ford Escort. And then was talking with the wife, and we kind of decided that it would be good to be able to be running in the top 5 instead of running just a class win. So I looked around for various different cars, and a good friend of mine, Chris Taylor, who was running Mithril Racing at the time, was into Alfa Racing. So I blame him slightly. But what came up is a 3.3 GTV6. And there was another car. Keith Waite had a car, who's been a long-term Alfa Romeo owner and racer, had another car for sale, much smarter than the white car that I bought. But the one I bought had a 3.3 litre engine with a broken gearbox. So I got it at a fairly reasonable price. So the idea was that this car was going to be able to run in the top 5. So I eventually put it back together again and stuff. And funny enough, I'd never, ever worked on one of these cars before. And it was horrendous, just jacking it up for the first time, taking this car apart and stuff, because it had a broken gearbox. I did that on my back with about sort of foot of clearance in the garage, in the workshop behind the house. And at the time, BLS were looking after the car for the previous owner. So I gave them the gearbox to fix. And then they fixed it, put it back in the car. And a really good friend of mine, Dave Hill, and me went to Donington Park for the first Alfa race that we ever took part in 94. And we went and won it.
Well, that's top 5.
That's the top 5.
Yeah. Very much top 5.
And from that moment on, I became an Alfa Romeo specialist. And I knew diddly squat about these cars, to be perfectly honest. And so, because the first time I drove it was round Goodwood, and it handled like a wet fish. It was just a horrible thing to drive. So we did all sorts of little changes to it, and we got to Donington in a better place. And then we went to Castle Combe and got it even a better place. And it just got better and better and better. And that car I campaigned it for 3.5-4 years, did 60 odd races with it, and it only failed to start one race when the engine actually expired. But before that, it had done 64 races with no non-finishes. Quite amazing, really, because back in the day, the Alfa Championship was a lot of rounds. It was like going to work. It was like 16 or so rounds a year, and we used to travel all over the country to do it. And, we were traveling 5 or 6 hours to go to Alton Park from down to the south here. And we were doing 10-lap races around Foster's, not 20-minute or 25-minute races, 10 laps around Foster's, which was 1 minute and 5 seconds or something. We were going all that way for 10 minutes worth of motorsport. It was looking back on it, it was actually a little bit mad.
As Richard knows, one of the things that I do in the magazine is go through and do an archive, look back 10, 20, 30, 40, and you get to the 90s issue, 80s and 90s issues, and 2/3 of the magazine every other month is race reports from the 4 or 5 rounds of the championship that happens. It's the last issue.
Yeah. And dear Michael, he wrote really well, and you kind of knew what was happening in the race reports. They were a fantastic record of motor racing back in the time, because not only did you have the A2 E groups of racing, you had Class F, which had their own support races, which was grids of. Each grid had sort of 30 cars in each grid. That was amazing. And it's such a shame that it's dwindled. But, life goes on and you get these more modern cars, which are much more difficult to run and stuff, which is a shame. But,
we were talking about this the other day. The great irony of the Alfa Championship was last year when they decided that they had to open it up to other marques because they just couldn't get the grids. And they got 2 or 3 other marques and an extra 10, 15 cars that they hadn't seen for years. It was the biggest Alfa grids they've had for 10 or 20 years. And this year, Touch Melamine or whatever this is, looks even better with a lot of new cars being built. But talking to some of the people, there's a couple of people building Giulia Quadrifoglio race cars. And they're kind of taking 2 steps forward and then ripping half the electronics out and starting again because
they're just too complicated. Realistically, it's such a shame. You just need engine, gearbox, steering wheel, 4 wheels. Would be great. But now you've got all the traction control, all the electronics that the manufacturers put in. And some of these cars will not work without all the bits and bobs, which is such a shame. I think what really happened in the Class F things, when people started to try and run the Mitos and various different, slightly more modern cars than the 33s, they all had sort of anti-skid type thing, fuel control and that sort of stuff. The cars wouldn't work with all that disconnected. And so they were fighting stuff. You couldn't run them as a production car because you couldn't actually race without this stuff. And that took some of the fun out of it, So shame, but again, as life moves on, I guess.
Well, yeah, and if you look at the entries now, the biggest class, I think, is modified.
Yes.
Because it solves that problem. You just rip all the electronics out and put custom race electronics in and the problem's solved for small values of solved.
Yeah.
Well, large checks, small values of solved.
Yes, exactly. Yes, yeah. It's just different. And if you're prepared to go with different, then it works.
So you started racing Alfettas in 94. Has it been continuous since then, or gaps?
There's been gaps. We did 94. I won the championship 95. I forget. I think it was 95, 96. We missed the championship by 1 point because we had an engine problem by 1 point from becoming 3 times Alfa championship, which I think has been now resolved. So I did try to win it 3 times and lost by 1 point. And then after that, sold the car and then carried on. We did some stuff with a Lancia Stratos in some British GT stuff. Then I raced some more sports 2000s, which I'm currently doing, and various different. I built an Alfa 33 after the GTV6 because I thought that would be quite fun. I shared an Alfa Sud with a guy called Leon Bailey and Paul Edwards. We did some racings with that and just all sorts of various different things, but sort of settled into sports 2000, and then latterly with Richard with his Alfetta.
Which is a lovely segue, thank you.
Yeah.
Great. So Richard, tell us your story. Well, the Alfa-related bit.
The Alfa-related bit is quite easy, really. I went to the British Grand Prix races at Brands Hatch with my dad as a kid, and I always liked the Alfas, and actually John's car was there, but I always remember a red one overtaking us. My dad was a big Ferrari fan, and this red GTV6 came howling past us sort of around Leeds Castle, and that was it. I wanted one, and then I ended up buying a wreck of an Alfetta when I was at university, which was a proper basket case. It was one of those like 500 quid ones out the back of the magazine. And that was kind of the start of it. And then I'd go to places like Donington and watch the Alfa races, and stupidly met Chris and Andy Page at Donington once. And they kind of hooked me into the race car side of it because they were just so nice and friendly and open. It was such a lovely atmosphere. I was looking for a car. Didn't necessarily want a race car, but I found a magazine article with an Alfetta GTV for sale, ex-dealer team apparently. I thought it was actually might have been John's car, but it turns out it was Peter Hilliard's, but I didn't even know that at the time. And it was in a container in Shrewsbury, looking very, very sad and forlorn. And then I stupidly bought it. And once you do that, you're stuffed really, is that you've got to do something with it. Then I discovered there was nothing around because it was such a specialised bit of kit. Everything on it wasn't exactly the same as the road car. Every part of it was just modified in some way. And you couldn't just go down the road and buy a bit. You had to find someone that knew about it, go and see them, find out whether or not they could do it for you or whether they knew where you could get something from. And all of the Auto Delta parts, the hallowed Auto Delta bits, they just didn't exist, or if they did, there was so much money and they were in someone's shed and nobody'd sell them to you anyway. So I ended up having to look at making my own parts. Initially, it was a gearbox. I think that was the first thing that I went down to see you about, wasn't it?
When was this roughly?
Oh, God. 2006, maybe? Because you bought a car off me before that.
We bought a bit of a car for you to repair Ian Stapleton's car.
Yes, that's right. I was getting rid of a few wrecks out of the garden.
We bought a car off you to buy the roof.
That's right, yeah.
Yes, another one. No, another one.
Not the roof that ended up on that.
So I ended up going to Chris because obviously he was the Alfetta guru, really. That's kind of how it came across. And I wanted a straight cut, close ratio gearbox. And at the time, I think Nev Simpson and Ian Stapleton were working out of they were trying to get gearboxes done as well. And I sort of jumped on the bandwagon and said, I'll sort it out. So I went off and found someone to build me a gearbox. And they didn't just build me one, they built 5. And I was like, I only wanted one. And Mark at Elite just went, well, sell the other 4 then. And that was kind of what kicked it all off.
Working together for most of that 20 years, or?
Yeah, but in it, in and out. Yeah. I was working in the sort of exhibition, film, TV sort of industry for many years and doing the car stuff on the side. And that just kept building because I want a clutch housing for my car. So you can't just get one clutch housing. You have to have 5 or 10 clutch housings. Or you want a torsion bar adjuster. It's like, well, I can go and make one, but it costs so much money, make 10. It doesn't cost much more than making one, and you end up having the other ones to sell, and that sort of kept growing. And we developed. I built the 2-litre car, and then it became the point of like, well, what am I going to do with it? I've got this car; it's all complete. It's got HTP papers. What am I going to do? So I took it down to Chris to get it set up, and then I think we went to Donington, didn't we, to test it? Yeah. And it blew up on the first time we used it on track because I put the wrong petrol in. I think basically blew the head gasket up. I accidentally put 95 in rather than 97 or 99, and it was running quite a lot of advance, and it blew the head gasket, so that was a bit of a shame. And it just kind of went from there, really.
So what does the business look like today, or the 2 sides of the business?
There's definitely 2 sides. Richard does all his sort of selling of bits and pieces and parts. He's much better on the telephone than I am. So he's been organising some servicing and repairing other cars and stuff. So, yeah, I end up doing a bit more spannering than he does. He spends ages on the telephone talking to various different people. And which is fine because that's how you get some business. Yeah, so sort of a reasonably fair division of labour, I would say, most of the time. And it's kind of, it enables us to go motor racing, which is very expensive now. Nothing like it used to be. It used to be relatively not cheap, but it was definitely affordable for, if you wanted to go motor racing. Now you've got a big effort because it's to go motor racing for a weekend. It's almost like a holiday fund to go motor racing just for one weekend, and people have got to put up with you spending that sort of money. So I'm very fortunate. Richard helps to go motor racing, and so I would say a reasonably fair division of labour, of parts and a bit of servicing and car thing. And then we're building a few cars as well. So for various different customers, we've got a rally car, and we've got a very special road car we're building for someone, and various other little projects up in the sideline. Richard does a sort of project management, I would say, is a glorious word for organising where all the parts come from. But he's pretty good at
dealing with the payments.
Dealing with the payments and stuff, yes. So he's pretty good at that. which is helpful because I'm not. I prefer to get my hands dirty and just get on with it.
I guess last thing, and two questions in one really. Plans for the future for the business and motor racing plans for the near future.
Motor racing, we'll still carry on doing motor racing for as long as I can, definitely.
I'm getting old speech.
I'm getting old speech, I'm getting old speech. I've been doing it a long time now, so at some stage there will be a kind of slowdown, not necessarily full stop, but a slowdown, because it's weekends go motor racing. It's not just a Saturday or a Sunday, it's Friday through to Monday, and it does take quite a lot out of you because you put a lot of effort into going motor racing now, more so I would think probably than we used to, basically because of the cost. You want to do well. I've been very fortunate enough to win quite a lot of races, and whereas winning is nice, taking part and actually having a race with some people is a lot of fun. It's nice if you have a race and win, but it's not necessarily just a question of driving around in front.
And I guess that's self-reinforcing, isn't it? If you have to do more because you've spent so much, you end up spending more, which means you have to do more, which means
it just escalates. Yes, exactly. We're fortunate enough we've been invited to the members meeting in a few weeks' time, but we're now using sustainable fuel and stuff, and the cost of that for the private individual is a lot of money, which in my opinion isn't really sustainable because the cost of the fuel is so great. But that's just a gripe. If it means we can continue motor racing, then that's fine. But the youngsters aren't the 20 or 30-year-old guys, talking about them being youngsters, aren't going to go historic motor racing, and the costs of that. It's not, in my opinion, sustainable. But we'll carry on as long as we can, and then if we can still work and make a little bit of money doing stuff, then we'll carry on.
We're also doing a bit of racing with George Osborne, which was another colleague of Chris's. I think you used to work together, didn't you?
We worked together, yeah. Started working with George at a company called Mithril Racing at Goodwood for years. He started working when he was 15. He's now
More than that.
He's quite, I can't remember how old he is.
Okay. He's not 40. No. We have a great relationship with George.
So we're doing a bit of racing with George as well over the next couple of years as well, which is another string to the bow.
So, yeah.
It's funny, I found some old photos from years ago when I was an IT journalist. And one of them was a corporate day out that I did as a guest of NEC, I think. There's a picture of me at about 2021 in a Formula 4 2000 Mithril on a track day here. So, yeah.
When was that?
It would have been 91, 92, I would think.
Yeah, I would have been here then. Yeah, 87 I started here. Yeah.
I'll send you the photo.
Yeah.
There's some great videos of Chris running a Davrian around Goodwood, but where we are. It doesn't look anything like this now. Back then it was just amazing, really.
I always tell this story. The day I realised I would never be a racing driver was that day, because one of the things they did was take us out for passenger laps with a Honda CRX Challenge.
That would have been me.
Okay. Yeah, because I remember I asked you what the metallic scraping sound was when we were cornering, and you said you'd run out of sidewalls.
Yeah.
And it was that point that I thought, no, I couldn't do that.
Yeah, it was amazing. We with the CRXs, we did a lot of miles around here with those cars.
We're doing the CTCRC support races for the British touring cars at Alton Park in June. So it's a big ITV4 televised event, so we'll be getting some television coverage.
In the Napolina car?
In the Dooley car, yeah.
On proper tyres?
On proper tyres with some proper brakes and maybe slightly lighter.
I'll have to explain the tyre story in the outro, because I think... I'm not a fan of the tyres we have to run for Goodwood. They're an absolute pain, but it's part of the rules, so we have to sort of so I can get on with it, really. That's motor racing, so I'm told.
Apparently.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
No problem at all.
That's it for this episode. The next episode will be our annual roundtable preview of the spring and summer and autumn of events the club has planned. Episode 121 will be available to download from 1:30 p.m. on Sunday the 3rd of May from Apple Podcasts, Podcast Addict, YouTube, Podbean, the club's website, and everywhere else good podcasts are found. Until then, stay safe.